Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings. Welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast, Eileen. If you wouldn't mind giving us a brief introduction to yourself.
Hi, everybody. I am Eileen Jennings-Brown. I am Scottish, if you can't tell from the accent. I live in Scotland, but I actually work in London. So yes, I did that commute week in, week out, lived in hotels until we all went into lockdown back in March. The organisation I work for is called the Wellcome Trust, and we are a philanthropic organisation. We're a charity first, and we give away money. Last year we gave away £1 billion. We're quite a wealthy charity. We gave away £1 billion to help science and into research into urgent health issues. So that's what we do first and foremost. But we're also a bank, and we look after our endowment ourselves, and we're also a museum and a library. So we're quite an interesting organisation. But I head up a team of 65 people. My role is head of technology, and we provide all of the IT structure, all the IT services, applications, change, delivery, and products across the whole suite. So we're very busy, and we've been very busy throughout the last, 9 months now. Can't believe where the time has gone. That's me in a nutshell, really, where I am today.
Yeah, that's great. I actually wanted to ask you, where in Scotland are you commuting from?
Well, I live in a wee town called Alloa, which is just outside Stirling. It is equidistant between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and it's just off the motorway as well. So it was actually quite tactical moving here, because it meant for the commute I could actually go from any of the airports or just jump on the motorway. So I commute usually from Edinburgh. But I do like to keep it interesting for myself, because doing the same commute week in, week out, I find rather boring. So sometimes I like to drive. Sometimes I would get a train. Sometimes I fly. Sometimes I didn't go at all. In fact, I haven't been at all for the last 9 months. I've kept it interesting.
Yeah, because I used to do the commute from London to Edinburgh.
Hey, so you did it in reverse then? You came up
reverse, which was great until the clocks switched. Because you used to catch a 7 a.m. flight up, and then when the clock switches to 6 a.m. flight, it kills you. Absolutely kills you.
It's so dark as well, isn't it? I mean, what's the time now? So the sun is going to set here in about 15 minutes. It's 3:15. The sun's going to set in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Not already, and that's it. And it is quite dark in the winter, but in the summertime at 11 o'clock at night, you can go out and have a round of golf.
Yes.
So it's great. So how long did you do that commute for then, Ryan?
11 months.
That's quite a long time.
Yeah, it wasn't every day. It wasn't every week.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a couple of times on and off. I was helping a business up in Fife.
Yeah, just along. I'm from Fife.
Yeah. So it was actually I quite enjoyed it, because it was just outside of Edinburgh. It's a nice little town. It had all the amenities. It was nice. I quite enjoyed it. It was not too far from St Andrews either, if you like a bit of golf.
I was going to ask you where about in Fife. So it's not far from St Andrews. That is a really nice town, actually. It's very pretty.
Yeah, I couldn't actually tell you now. Kirkcaldy? That's where it was.
Kirkcaldy, yeah. There's a great comedian called Billy Connolly, as if you didn't know who Billy Connolly is. But go and look it up on the internet. He did this sketch about Kirkcaldy, and it's where linoleum comes from, but nobody can pronounce the word linoleum. I'm not going to tell you the joke, but it will have you in stitches. Go and Kirkcaldy and linoleum and listen to this. It's really funny.
No, I'll go find it. I love him as a comedian. He's really good. I liked him as an actor too, in a couple of movies that he did.
Yeah, he did. He was not the Harry Potter movies, wasn't he?
Not Harry Potter, but he did a couple. He did The Man Who Sued God.
which is an Australian movie where his yacht got destroyed by a storm and he couldn't get insurance to pay because they called it an act of God. And he took him to court. And then he did another one which was called Big Joe.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Where he's a florist, and he basically, lives his life as a florist, and he's pretty chilled and stuff. And he gets they confuse him with Big Joe the assassin, who's a mobster.
Okay.
And he walks around, everyone thinks he's this mobster, but meanwhile he's just this florist. And it turns out his brother has used his nickname as Big Joe to be this this assassin.
Oh, okay. That's
at the end he sorts it all out because he appears, and it's really well done.
Yeah, I might go and look that up actually. Big Joe, I haven't heard of it, but it does sound quite funny. So thanks for the recommendation.
No problem. I've always got something in my head that's worth sharing. So let's pop one of the questions in. So what does the digital workspace mean? I mean, you've mentioned quite a few different avenues for a business. I would think there would be quite a few different flavors. Being a museum or a bank or charity that you'd have to contend with getting people to work, being able to work.
Yeah, well, so I love the term digital workspace. And I actually think that Wellcome is a digital organisation. We do 95% of our work online. I think the challenge for many organisations out there is actually recognising that they are a digital workspace. And so Wellcome does think that we are a charity first, and we give this money away and we help science and research and so on and so forth. But the reality is that you can't do that without the digital technology and without the platforms to communicate whatever your message is, and without all these products and tools that help people be productive and manage performance. So I'm a big fan of helping organizations and businesses understand and recognize you're a digital organization first. You want to create a digital workspace environment for your staff, and then you happen to be a bank, or you happen to be a museum. I realise in a museum it's a bit harder because people come in and they like to touch stuff. It's a bit more tactile. But actually in our museum, we use digital to help enhance the experience of coming into the museum. So we have exhibitions, and we've got an AV team, and the AV team do the lighting and all the video in order to make whatever the artifacts are really stand out and be able to tell their story. So for me, a digital workspace, to answer your question, because I realise I've gone off on one, I just like the term, and I like people to try and think about, I'm a digital this or that, I'm pointing left and pointing right, and so how does that then affect me? To answer your question, what does a digital workspace mean to me? I actually think it's about simplification. It's about having the boring tasks that you would otherwise not enjoy doing being done for you through automation, for example. And being able to connect and communicate and have experiences that are different to an experience that you may have if you were to physically be in a location. Actually, you can enhance a physical experience through digital as well. So it's quite a broad answer. Pick from that the one that resonates.
No, well, I think what you said there at the beginning was actually quite nice in the way that you sort of positioned it as a platform of platforms with vertical, I don't want to say solutions, because that almost sounds very marketing spiel. But as you get more specific, as you move away from the platform to be more specific, you do get a tower, a more sharp edge. Where you say something like in a museum, it's more tactile. So you might have AR and VR applied to do something, where you wouldn't have that necessarily for an office worker who's working with spreadsheets.
That's right, yeah. But then I would like to think that for somebody who works with spreadsheets, if they wanted, we could use digital to try and make that really interesting for them. Instead of, and a bit more like an experience, maybe we could use augmentation or virtual reality in order to try and make that interesting and automate some of the boring stuff. So, yeah, and then we look at the side where the bank is, we call it a bank, we just manage our own investment, but actually our own portfolio, but actually all of that is done through digital technology. They can't do it without having the Bloombergs and the JP Morgans and all of this technology around them to even have that data visible to them so they can make the decisions. So I'm not sure that people instantly recognize how much they depend on digital, and therefore surround themselves with a digital workspace in order to do their jobs. And it leaches into the home. You can get all of this tech in your house, the Internet of Things. You can control your washing machine from the train. You can turn your lights on from someone else's house. You can, the Internet of Things. Digital workspace is beyond just a workspace. It's actually a digital way of life.
Yeah, I think you're so right there, Ben. That what was previously for some people completely separate environments or separate ecosystems has now blended completely. So it's that integrated working.
Yeah. What does digital workspace mean for you then?
Yeah, I'm very similar to what you said. To me, it's how do you get your work done using whatever tools, technology, and sometimes it's not even the technology as in the sense of electronic technology, but it could be the right writing pad to take your notes on that you can take a picture of that can go into your filing system digitally. Or, we're traveling back to South Africa for 2 months. So I'm packing my bag right now, and I've packed my virtual office bag now, which has now become my go bag. And, it's those things that are not necessarily technology based, but they are part of my digital working kit, if you like. So anywhere that gets me to be able to do my work in context, that's digital workspace.
Do you find that you're being forced down a path to have to adopt a digital product or some piece of technology because actually that's the only choice that's left open to you?
Do you mean, well, give me some context to that question.
So, I don't know, a really good example actually is buying taxing your car.
Yeah.
You can't go into the post office anymore and buy the car tax. You can only do it online. The interesting thing about that is that alienated an entire an entire demographic of individuals who weren't digitally capable. So almost they had no choice to have to learn digital because that was the only way they could achieve the outcome that they wanted. Are you finding that for you?
It's funny you give that example because that's exactly the example I saw last Sunday at the post office. And it wasn't an old person who was complaining. It was a 25-year-old that was literally losing his marbles.
Wow.
Because he didn't want to go online to do his car tax. His dad had helped him fill in the form. And I don't know, maybe he was, they had a disability or something, but he just could not get the fact that the post office didn't do it anymore. And it was easy to do it online. And it literally, I did it the other day, it's not difficult. But he would not get past this thing that he filled in a form and they should just take the form and pay and take his money. And it got ugly as British people can get. But it is that example. And yes, I think to some extent that is one of the problems with what people see as digital. They see it often as a restrictive mechanism as opposed to an enablement mechanism.
Yeah, it should enhance, shouldn't it? It should enhance the thing that you're trying to do. Yeah. But sometimes perhaps we've taken it too far and then to your point, it has made it quite restrictive.
Yeah, and my favorite example is the Excel problem. You have someone from the business that's built a workbook full of macros and whatever it is to do some piece of work. They've automated. They've gone and learned how to use macros and Excel calculations and formulas and stuff. And that Excel spreadsheet, which was one person and automating their lives and making it easier, has now become the team's way of doing their work.
Yeah.
So it's because it's saving them time, inverted commas, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But at some point that becomes the backbone of that business unit. And someone decides, we need to turn this into an application. And you spend how much time trying to figure out what the application is. And all the flexibility that Excel offers has to get taken away to some extent when you build that application, when you systematize it. And often what ends up being the output isn't what the people that were using it wanted, because they actually quite enjoyed that it was in Excel. They could just add a new sheet when they wanted to and add more formulas or manipulate the formulas and all that stuff that sits behind code. Actually, they didn't want that.
It's so true, actually. Yes, and these things just morph, don't they? Other people come along, they take ownership. It becomes a thing it was never intended to be when it, first came to life. And yes, listen to us, Slate and digital.
But I was just thinking about we had a process at UBS called end user applications, which was the process where you had to register if you built yourself your own application. So if you used Excel or something like that, it was a way of tracking down all these things. Not so much to remove them, but just to know about them.
Yeah, that's quite clever, actually. It makes people feel empowered and like they have autonomy, but Big Brother's actually watching.
Yeah, I don't think I got that feeling.
Okay.
Because the minute you put yourself on the radar, this is what all these things do. The minute you're on the radar, then every year you have to go through a certification process, which means now you have another thing you have to do beyond your day job to fit in. So I don't think it was ever well received. But from my point of view, because I used to write obviously little applications to do things.
Yeah.
Very so often you would see this thing pop up and you're like, oh, no, I want to add it. Because obviously we were detecting all the EXCs that were running in the bank.
Yeah, of course.
And you'd get sort of flagged for running EXCs that weren't belonging to an application. You'd have to put it into the inventory system.
Way to combat shadow IT.
Yeah, shadow IT. That's a good name. That's the best name for it.
Yeah.
I do some problem, shadow IT. Sometimes you have to embrace it.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's the trend I've seen, is that more and more it's realizing, especially with SaaS, that people are going to adopt, these technologies, and business is moving faster. So it's not necessarily, shadow IT kind of sounds like a shady thing that people are doing to get around IT. But I think a lot of the time it's just technology is so easy for anyone to run with these days, and people want to move fast. So
I think you make a good point there, actually. That's so true. And that's what we see as well. And so we try and embrace this by letting people find their own products that actually will serve the purpose that they need it to. I mean, they're the experts. They're, in terms of what their role is, they know what works for them. Our role is then to try and make sure it's secure, it's compliant, it fits with the overall strategy, the architecture. There's not duplication of products that are doing all the same thing. So the role is changing, because being able to look after a product yourself is actually becoming easier for the individual. And the role of IT is changing as a result. And it's just whether IT can keep up with that.
Yeah, I think that last phrase is the key point there, is keeping up, because often IT is so bogged down with so many projects, and you mentioned transformation projects. And then a business wants to do something, they want to pivot, they need to go into a new market or something like that, and they need to, have a new CRM or something like that for that space. And IT can't just, drop everything and put a team on that. And often it is just a credit card transaction. They go and sign up for some trial of that CRM, and it's, on their corporate card. And they start using it for a couple of months, and then somehow that gets back into IT, that there's another application to worry about. And then they find out that thing's got, as you say, security problems, or thankfully it doesn't. And then you've got to get the data in and out as well, because you want to use it in other parts of the business.
Yeah, it just finds itself as part of the ecosystem surreptitiously until somebody in IT or security stumbles upon it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting days. And that, everybody, is the digital workplace today. Back to that question, I'd like to add to the list of what it means to me is complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a level of complexity to deliver it, but hopefully a simple experience to use it.
Oh, I like that. You should get that trademarked or quoted or copyrighted or whatever.
Make a bumper sticker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's like, I always think of that the iceberg with all the stuff below the waterline, and that's trying to deliver a VDI solution, but the user only cares about when they log in the morning, they've got a screen that logs them in, and they've got their desktop and they can work, and then they don't care about all the stuff that we think is important around, cloned images that are on the latest build, the latest patches, and we stream down 20 gigs of applications to them, and all their data is connected using app volumes and app stacks and all that. They don't care about that stuff. They just care that it works.
That's right. It's the what they're interested in.
Yeah.
they cared about it, they'd work in IT. There you go.
Yeah. Do you? I mean, in manage, because you mentioned 65 people, but what is the user base that you have to look after?
So there's about 1,200 people.
Okay.
And we're all pretty much under one roof. So when I say that we have a bank, we are a charity, and we have a museum, all of that's actually under the same roof, which does add its own complexities. And I think the interesting thing about all of this is that that's 3 different industries, and it attracts 3 different kinds of people. And so for the team, it does, not only is the technology complex because of the nuances of those different user types, but then the cultures that come with it, because you have creative types who do exhibitions and actually meet and greet visitors into the museum, but then you've got people who come from a banking background or an investment background, and they have very specific standards and they're used to regulations and authority, and so that for the team makes it interesting over and above just the technology complexities that they have. So there's 65 in my team, but actually I work in what's called the Digital and Technology division, and there's about 100 of us in the whole division, but my team, so we do digital as well, we do user experience, we've got some EAs, we dabble with a PMO, but my team do all of this. You know, if you want to be able to work, then it's my team that are going to make that happen for you, and if you want to have a great experience whilst you're working, then it's my team that are going to facilitate that for you. If it's broken, we're going to fix it for you, and we're going to change it and transform it. So one of the things, because we touched on transformation, one of the things that we did over the summer was we changed Wellcome from a .ac.uk domain extension to .org, which helps with the Wellcome strategy, which got launched in October. So we have a new strategy that's gone out into society, which is about tackling emergent, urgent health issues around climate, around mental health. So by changing ourselves to a .org, it enables Wellcome to be recognised as we have a global voice, we're on the global platform. And that was the thing that we did over the summer. We changed our domain name as well. So it's busy times.
That's easy to do that. You just flick a switch.
That was the interesting thing about the whole project, because about a year ago we put our finger in the air, we went, okay, to change this, we think it's going to cost this amount of money and it's going to take us 18 months. But we didn't actually know at that point in time. And it was really just to secure the budget and to actually help everybody realize that once we start this, we're not going to stop this, and we're going to change every single application, everything that everyone logs into, every interdependency, every security certificate, anything that has a .ac.uk extension will change to .org, and we need to now go off and discover what that actually takes. But you're absolutely right. When it came down to it, and the way and the narrative that we gave the organisation, it was, we're going to flick the switch on the 1st of September. We're going to flick the switch on email on the 1st of December. And we literally just talked about it like it was a really simple thing. In the background, we were doing all of this investigating to make sure that we weren't going to break a thing. We weren't going to lose out on some cost savings we had somewhere as a result of being recognised as an academic institution, you know, because of some subscription that we had to things. So there was a lot of research that had to be done. And actually, about 2 years ago, we did a PR exercise, and we did rebrand from Wellcome Trust to Wellcome. So we had the great support of our communications team, who actually helped the rest of Wellcome understand that this was just the technology catching up with the rebrand that we did 2 years ago. So it could have been really difficult, but the narrative and the support of our comms actually made it simpler. We're not out of the woods yet. We still have some of the other background work that we've got to do, changing applications and interdependencies. But as far as everyone's concerned, Wellcome is wellcome.org. Email addresses are the bit that you see is all .org. The stuff in the background, we're still doing work on that.
And I think there's a level of things you have to do before you switch, and there's things you can always mop up at the end.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, we've got multiple websites, and so we've got to try and time it all as well. Timing, I think, was critical, and making sure that if we're going to switch this website, we switch them all at the same time, and the content within it. So if there's a reference to Wellcome.ac.uk, somebody's got to go in and do all of that. There's actually quite a lot involved in the planning, but it is literally, to your point, it's just flicking a switch. It is easy.
Did you run in parallel with the old domain just in case, or did you have to turn it off to see things were working?
No, we didn't have to do that. We've still got the old domain up and running, actually. The domain name is still running, because the change itself, because of all the background changes that we're having to do, we have to keep that running. And the message might not have got out there to everybody that actually, if you want to email us on AC UK, it won't arrive. We'll probably keep that running for quite a few years as well, because of maybe some legalities and contracts and stuff, what have you.
Yeah.
So running. But the great news is, globally, we are seen as a .org UK, and it helps with the voice that we want the rest of the world to understand that we have.
Oh, great. You mentioned something about experience, and I wanted to sort of dig into that. I mean, how has that, monitoring end user experience, that's obviously different when they're all in the office to now being remote.
Wow. Well, the great thing is that we, where do I start? Today, we are getting our highest net promoter scores in terms of the support and the service that staff have. And we've been getting them consistently since we left the building in March. I think the fact that the team did such a great job of getting everyone decanted out of the building and then providing the support and putting a couple of new processes in place and what have you, and then just riding that wave all across the summer by being there and being incredibly responsive and proactive, actually it got the team from the back foot to the front foot. So there's a lot of positive feelings towards the service desk and towards the team in terms of the experience that they have. I think in terms of monitoring it, we're actually changing some of the underlying technology that we use so that we can be more proactive in monitoring monitoring the experience that people have with the technology by monitoring the technology itself. So one of the things that I've asked the team for is a digital experience score. Now, there's products out there that will tell you a digital experience score, but I've asked them to expand on that and think about, we need to include our net promoter score, we need to include the customer feedback, we need to include whether we're responding to SLAs or not, on top of this score that the computer is telling us in terms of how it's performing and whether applications are responsive. So I've asked them to go away and think about a way to combine all of that so we can get one score for every single person, and we can then prioritise those that have the greatest needs. One of the things I'd also like to include into that is accessibility, and to understand what is the experience for accessibility with all of our products, so we can try and drive improvements in that. Ideally, we would do accessibility by design. We're not that mature yet or sophisticated, but we talk in this way in order to put it at the forefront of our minds, so it's in our common language. And one of the questions we'll always say is that inclusive for everybody? And if it's not, then we have to start from it being inclusive for everyone, and then build it out from there. So to answer your question about monitoring the experience of everyone, fantastic job by the team, best net promoter scores ever, but we have a lot of work to do in order to understand at this experience score level, what does that actually mean. So we're putting tech in place.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to jump in here because full disclosure. So this is the space that I work in. I work for a digital experience monitoring vendor. But you're still right about the need to combine the qualitative with the quantitative. That's something that we built into our product and we talk about all the time. But and as well, the leading analyst firms, covering this area talk about the importance of, you not only need to understand the performance and how the technology is being used to create that technology experience score, but also have qualitative feedback mechanism. So the NPS score that you noted is a great example of that. But, whether it's surveying there's different ways to do it, adding in chatbots, there's different mechanisms, but having both the voice of the user and how they perceive their experience and the actual technology objective experience, both of those sides need to be incorporated to ultimately really make digital experience initiatives, I think, successful.
Yeah, you make a good point, and it's nice to know that I'm not the only one that thinks like that, and that we're not trying to invent something that would just be harder to come up with. So it sounds like there's lots of companies out there where we can leverage their experiences and their knowledge to help us get the answers that we're looking for. I mean, ideally, the question that I commonly ask the team is, what is it that we need to shift the dial on? And then go away and reverse engineer all the things that make up that one thing that we need to shift the dial on. And that's what we need to be looking at. So we have some great conversations in the team about that. And we have very different opinions about what we need to shift the dial on. But your point, actually, yeah, I think if there's other organizations out there who are doing this, providing a holistic experience and a way in order to understand that, then I'd love to talk to them. I'd love to learn.
No, I just love it. You're explaining exactly what this, I mean, I'm not trying to sell you on our tool or anything, but you're just you're sending the same message back to me, which is the exact problem that this kind of tool is meant to solve. So, I mean, it's great that I think more and more organizations are realizing the need to, prioritize digital experience. I think a few years ago, it wasn't so top of mind, but definitely seeing.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you as a sort of follow-up question is have you seen in your organization as Wellcome as that has become a priority topic, whereas before it was kind of a gripe. Everyone had a gripe about it, but no one really wanted to prioritize any funding to do anything about it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's such a good question. I think, yes, it is very important to us, but we talk about outcomes, and we recognise that to get the outcome, you need all of the moving parts in order to get the outcome that you're looking for. The Wellcome as an organisation have a very open mind, and the appetite is there to invest if that's what it takes to get the right answers that we're looking for. Don't think I'm really answering your question though, Ryan. I think I've taken it down another path.
No, well, the reason why I ask it that way is that I've worked in two large organizations where I've been very lucky that at a very high level, there's been a focus on that. So when I moved to the UK, I worked for a large American bank, and the CIO, or CTO, I think it was at the time, was driving this as one of the key agendas. That we had to know what the end user's experience was at all times, and be able to not only know what they were doing, and this was sort of another question I was going to ask you as well, we needed to proactively repair any issues with their experience. Now, what does that proactiveness mean? Does that mean clearing out disk space when they've run out of disk, when they're clearing out temporary files and they run out of disk space? Does that mean stopping applications that are using too many resources because you're on a virtual infrastructure, or whatever it may be? To another organization where it was the number one item in an end user survey to say that their performance of their desktop was affecting their ability to work and they need this fixed, to spin up a project that ran and focused on that. So you were going to say something?
So, yeah, I mean, well, we do have that. We do have a focus. We do have a focus on the experience. We look at the support being great, but we also look at if the technology being fit for purpose, which in itself then becomes about the experience, because fit for purpose is subjective. And then we have, every organization will be familiar with this. It's about having VIPs who have different expectations about the performance and the experience they have with their equipment. And so, yes, in certain areas, we do have to have a higher focus and priority on making sure those kinds of individuals get the experience that they need. In particular, I'm thinking about those who work in our investments division in the bank, and that's because all of us are here to protect the endowment. We're all here to make sure Wellcome has the money so that we can then give that away into research for science and health. So we do have to prioritize those individuals. Yeah, and we do see it. So there is a focus on it, yes. But I think for us, we call it making sure it's fit for purpose.
Yeah.
Understanding what your perception of fit for purpose is, so that we give them the right and the most appropriate experience.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I've seen it in organizations where it's things like having the right data provided to you so that you can order the right hardware for the person. So they don't just get the generic laptop that was left on the shelf and it's been rebuilt and they just get it. It's knowing what the job role they're going into needs as an average. So they get, the right spec laptop, or they go straight to a Citrix environment or to a VDI environment or whatever it is, depending on what they do. So yeah, I can definitely see where you guys are going. I mean, going back to your supporting of users, is that manual, or do you have some level of automation involved there as well? So sort of AI ops that's very buzzwordy now.
It's rather manual, if I'm honest. The culture of one that they actually like that human interaction.
Yeah.
So the only digital aspect for the support really is people can log tickets themselves, so they can report issues themselves through we use a tool, most organizations do, but then sitting behind that, we have somebody that picks that up and then makes a phone call and then remotes onto the machine in much the traditional way. We don't really have self-healing tech yet, but with the new products that we're rolling out, we will be able to introduce that. And we will, even simple tasks like one of the products that is proactive and identifies, a certain critical failure somewhere, it'll just reboot the machine and it'll just do it automatically and it'll recognize that instead of the whole phone call, I've got a problem, can you help me type thing. So it's quite manual at the moment. I'm really looking forward to it being a lot more automatic though. And even doing things like using chatbots, I can't wait for the team to benefit from having the chatbot in place. Ideally, the team will be able to focus on the really interesting things as a result of some of these more mundane tasks being picked up through automation and through the technology, through self-healing technology. So that's where we're headed with that.
Yeah, it's an exciting space, and it's one of those spaces that never ends. There's always something to drill into to really improve. I mean, rebooting machines, it's such a silly thing, but there is definitely data that'll show you if you reboot a machine every 2 weeks, Windows machine specifically, you'll see performance improvements.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It's something so simple, and yet most people crack that joke about, have you rebooted it? A reboot fixes 98% of problems, but it's true. But they don't. When was the last time you all rebooted your machines?
Well, mine is automated, so it's every 2 weeks.
Something you scripted yourself, I imagine.
Yeah, I had to. But one of my gripes at the moment is the move from Windows 7 to Windows 10, and how bad an experience Windows 10 actually is.
Okay.
Compared to Windows 7. So, my background for the last sort of 8 years has been desktop engineering, or at least a good part of that. And looking at this data and trying to get it working, getting the platform working at least. And Windows 7 in comparison was actually a pretty good operating system. It actually was very, very stable. Windows 10, not so much. It's getting better, but yeah.
I remember when, you might be too young, do you remember Windows ME? So
yeah.
It was the intermediate between 98 and 2000. I actually really liked Windows ME.
Yeah.
Even though it was pretty garbage and it was just Windows 98 with a new front end, yeah. I actually quite liked it. I made the move from Windows to Mac about 5 years ago. And for a long time, I would then run a virtual instance of Windows on my MacBook in order to do my job. But once I moved to a Mac, I don't think I could go back to Windows.
Yeah, no, I'm in that exact position right now. So I've always used Windows because of work, and most enterprises are Windows-based. But actually the conundrum I'm dealing with now is, do I go Mac completely? Do I go to a Linux distro, which is what I'm testing out at the moment, because I kind of want to do something not just do everything Mac straight away.
Yeah.
But I don't see myself staying on Windows.
No. What about you, Heather?
I guess I'm not that picky of a user, but I use Windows 10 for work and Mac for everything else. But yeah, I mean, I guess I wanted to go back to automation just for a second, because there was a recent story I heard of one of our customers, and I can't remember all the exact details, so I'm sure I'm not going to tell all the juicy details. But when they were moving their users to remote, they had some portion of their user base. I want to say it was like 10K users or something like that. Some portion was already remote. So they had, I think, some sort of virtual desktop infrastructure to make that possible. So they basically were going to, when they had to move everybody else remote, duplicate whatever they were doing. And for some reason they spent like 4 weeks doing manual disk cleanup. 3 times a day, their team was doing some sort of like disk clean thing. And then now they realize they could have set up a disk clean script that would detect this. And then, it would take them 5 minutes to set up the script. And then none of that manual work would need to happen over those 4 weeks of pain. So I think to your point about like getting to more interesting work and not having to repeat those same low level tasks again and again, it can get super painful depending on the scenario.
You actually point out an interesting thing. So we had a very similar story. We had 10,000 VDIs, what do you call them? Not dynamic, static VDIs. So they get stateful. So they keep their state when you shut them down, you bring them back up again. Persistent, yeah. Sorry, I forget what the word was. And this is for an outsourced development center in one of the sort of cheaper locations. And there was a huge issue with their productivity because these guys couldn't actually function. And there was the problem with disk space all the time. And we deployed our DEM product, and we could just, the alarms just fired off all day long, running out of disk space. Now, the old approach from the operations guys was just to do the disk cleanup or to provision another machine. So you end up with these users with more than one VDI. And I'm not saying, completely another 10,000, but there would be another 3,000 or 4,000 that were provisioned. But no one ever took a step back because they probably never had the data to take that overarching view and actually realize that the C drive they provisioned was too small for all the applications they were deploying. So that design problem was never fixed. So the perpetuating problem cost more and more, and the business was forking out for more infrastructure all the time because they were told it was an infrastructure problem. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, it was actually they had more than enough capacity at the infrastructure level. They just didn't have the design right. And the reason why the infrastructure kept getting used up obviously was because of the pre-provisioning. So sometimes just having the data, not even the automation, is important. And being able to interpret it and use, I'd say, a bit of common sense, but common sense isn't always common, to fix the core problem, which is the design sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine that we've all got a few horror stories to tell about things that we've seen in our time. I've seen it where we've had systems where it's actually using the drive space as memory because there's not enough memory at it. But it took about 2 years to get to the bottom of the problem because it was hidden.
Yeah.
Well, and you just end up chucking resources at it. And actually, you never fix the problem because the problem is in the design.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this environment exactly the exact same problem. The person who designed it wasn't an engineer in the nicest way. So the users were given a one core, 1 to 2 gigs of RAM to run a platform that needed a minimum of 1 core and 4 gigs of RAM. And you're sort of going, well, how? And just because it works doesn't mean it's productive. You know what I mean? So it happens a lot. It does.
Yeah. Sometimes the constraints are as a result of budget. I mean, let's be honest, sometimes they just don't want to spend the money. And it could be due to lack of understanding, which is probably around the skills and capability, because 10 years ago, that was new tech. And now it's old tech.
Yeah.
People are doing storage in very different ways and provisioning laptops in very different ways and spinning up virtual environments in very different ways.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, the other problem here is you have the the operational guys were designing this, which means they're building something on the fly while they sort of fly the airplane. They're building the airplane whilst they are dealing with an issue somewhere else as well. So it's probably not getting the proper diligence or an unfatigued eye, let's say.
Yeah.
Which perpetuates problems. So it happens, you know.
How many times have you seen it where somebody builds something as a test environment and suddenly that is the production and you can't undo it? People are using it live.
I sometimes feel like I'm a bit of a grammar school teacher. Where I say, when you say prototype, this is what it means. When you say proof of concept, this is what it means. When you say you're building a minimum viable product, this is what it means. And none of those things necessarily mean that it stays on forever.
That's right, yeah. I mean, we had a thing recently where, when I say recently, it's about 8 months ago or so, but we were trying to figure out what systems we had where. And so we came to the conclusion that we were just going to turn stuff off and see who complained. And we had an instance where the Smithsonian Museum in America contacted us because they'd been using one of our images on one of the websites that we didn't even look after. They'd been using the image, and it wasn't until we turned it off here that we found out that somebody over there was actually using it, and we hadn't been using this thing for years.
Yeah, legacy, the pain of legacy technology, which I read Mark Chillingworth's article about the work you're doing at Wellcome, and he was a recent guest on the show. Actually, I don't know if that's kind of how this connection got made, or if that's a happy circumstance. Okay.
Yeah.
But I gathered from that, being Wellcome having been around for so long, and it sounds like you've been involved in a lot of the modernization work there, but I'm sure there's a lot of legacy stuff. So I love the just turning it off and waiting to see who screams, because sometimes you just, unless, you can, monitor it to some extent, but.
Yeah. And that's just one example of many. And we do have, when that came along, we had something like, 700 applications, and we've had a drive to try and get that down. Who needs 700 applications? That's one per person almost. That's nuts.
Pretty common, though, to have huge application portfolios like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so sometimes you just got to turn it off and see who complains and discover nobody does. So be bold, I would say. If anybody's looking for advice, be bold. Just do it. What's the worst that can happen?
So we went through an exercise where we had 4,500 applications that had to be cleaned up. And one of the lines of businesses was adamant that they needed a certain version of Adobe Writer. And I think the price tag was something silly like, and I'm guesstimating the number, let's say it was $2,000 a license for 1,400 users or something like that. So the price tag there was in the millions. And we had to prove to them with data that they didn't actually need it, but they still were adamant they needed it. So when we put it out and we deployed it and stuff, and it ended up circling back when they got the bill that no one was using it, but they were getting this bill because it was, instead of IT picking up the bill and again divided by the total user base, it was actually direct charging now. And all of a sudden they didn't need that license anymore. They just Adobe Reader was fine. In fact, using the browser now to read a PDF was also fine.
Acrobat versus Reader. Yeah, most people don't need Acrobat.
Yeah. But that's education through information.
Yeah, I'm a believer in talking about people thinking that they need to use a product. Sometimes a technique that I adopt, if I want to move people away from a product, is I try and make access to the one that I don't want them to use or we don't want them to use harder. Yeah. And so this feeds into the whole behaviour science of people, and people will always take the easiest path. And so, we're trying to help staff across Wellcome think more about doing more self-service and logging their own incidents instead of email or phone calls. And so, I'm toying with the idea and talking to the team about, let's just make it really hard to phone us. And you have to wait on that call for 20 minutes before someone answers it, because eventually they will just want to log a ticket themselves. But actually, the reality is that I'd see our net promoter score plummet before it went back up. And I don't know that we're quite ready with our self-service piece to say, look how fantastic and easy this is. But it is a technique that is worth adopting, is try and make a thing harder that you want people to stop using or stop doing. And they'll just naturally gravitate towards the easier thing.
So on that line, those two places where I worked, where we did this. If you were in technology, you couldn't use the voice routes to log a ticket. So you had to use technology that we put in place. So we had chatbots, and in one place we had an easy taskbar item that you could just create a ticket with. And the whole thing was to drive people to using those things, not so much because it was, besides, cheaper on the actual ticket, but also the more people were typing and the more we were giving them options to select, the more we could do analysis and bring in things like natural language processing or pattern recognition, at least, to try and do self-service. The other thing which we did was, or we thought about doing at least, was if you gave those 1 to 10 checks that you would do, which you normally pay a level 0 resource to do, you make that something that user does themselves. So have you rebooted your machine? Have you closed all the windows? Whatever it is, all those things. And if they did those things, then they were fast-tracked to talk to somebody. And if they didn't do those things, then they would go in the normal queue. So white glove service versus the sort of second-class citizen service, if you like, as one option. I think you can run for time. So do you want to tie up? Do you want to do a part 2 to this, or?
Yeah, I'm happy to do part 2. Right. Yeah, I've just seen the time and I realised that we're in the process of getting a new unified comm system, and so I'm trying to tie the whole thing into our meeting room system, telephony, the messaging platforms. We use Teams, we use Slack. We use lots of different VC systems. Mm-hmm. Trying to do something very unified. And I have the first supplier demo at 4:00.
No problem.
Just before we tie up, we usually cap off just giving the guests an opportunity to share, if you have any social media or anything where you want people to be able to find you and connect with you. If you want to share that with our guests, if you're interested in that.
Definitely. I'm on Twitter. My Twitter is EJB_sunshine. And I am on LinkedIn. And those are really the only 2 social media channels I'm on. I'm on Facebook, but I don't use it.
That's pretty common.
Cool. Well, super. Go and enjoy your demo.
Thanks very much. I look forward to speaking to you both very soon then.
Yes, great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
It's great.
That's great. Let's do a part 2.
Thanks very much. Speak to you soon.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter @the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.